Hey guys!
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Carm.
And we're Essency.
So today we're going to show you how we're going to put together a little herb garden. We have some pre-grown herbs, we have some pots that we picked up at local stores, and some accessories, so let's get right into it. So we're going to start with what you'll need. A lot of this stuff we were actually able to find at the dollar store, so let's get into all the accessories.
So the first thing you'll need is a pair of planting gloves, and we were able to find these at the dollar store. Mainly what they're for is just obviously to protect your own hands, but also just so you're not affecting the roots of the plant themselves. These gloves will protect that as well.
So now let's talk tools. We picked up these little sets from the dollar store. These are houseplant tools, so it comes with a trowel, a cultivator, and a spade. And basically that's just going to allow us to perfectly unplant them from the pots they're in now and get them into the ones that we like personally. So another thing that we picked up are gardening shears or pruners, and basically what these are for is once they're in their pot and the herbs are growing properly, when you want to start harvesting them, you should really be careful how you pick your herbs, and we're going to talk about different ways to harvest your herb plants, but a gardening shear or a mini pruner will just help to ensure that you're doing it the proper way so that you can get regrowth. And then another essential is obviously some potting mix. So we were actually able to find this at the dollar store, and it is just basic soil, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually fill it 2/3 of the way into the chosen pot when you're transferring the roots of the grown herb. Now you can do seeds too, and we clearly didn't pick these up at the dollar store. They did sell seeds at the dollar store. We just kind of, for Canadian weather, missed our mark on putting seeds in. So don't know if that'll work near you, but you can definitely try that as well. And lastly, we got a mister, and basically this is just a little plant water container, and it comes with a very fine mist, and basically it's good for delicate things like herbs because you want to be very gentle with the way that you get water into them. You can use a watering can to actually water the soil, which you should be doing, but a mister is just to keep everything fresh
on the top,
because some herbs require certain levels of moisture on the actual leaves themselves.
And then obviously you're gonna need your planters, which we did find at the dollar store, and your herbs of choice. So we're gonna go over the ones we picked for ourselves, but you're gonna want to do your research on whatever ones you end up doing. Now we picked ours just because of basically taste and different recipes. We were excited to try with them, and we will have our promised recipe cards on our website. But do your research. There are so many sites that know more than us about these plants, because at the end of the day you want to get your money's worth. They are an inexpensive project, especially if you're able to use them for the whole length of the summer.
So there are a couple of things to consider when you're building your herb garden. Number one is to consider the right location. Most herbs, when you're growing them, actually need two important things, and that's sunlight and well-drained soil. So basically what you want to do is consider a pot that has a hole in it. These ones didn't come with a hole in them, so we had to drill one in there by ourselves, but this one actually has a fixed hole. Basically, the plant needs to get about 6 hours of sunlight every day. So when you're putting them somewhere, whether it be in your house or in your backyard, make sure it's in a well-lit area and not somewhere where it's too covered or where they'll be in shade and not getting any sunlight throughout the day.
So that's one of the main reasons why we decided to put them in a planter, is because we knew we can move them around so that they can get their most sunlight, and also so that, you know, we weren't picking a fixed location in the ground, but you can certainly do that as long as your backyard or garden suits that.
And when you're thinking of this, think about, will they be kept indoors or outdoors? Basically, that's something that you have to decide for yourself. Herbs are not just a summer project, but we're actually going to be using them as a summer thing. If you were to maintain your potted herbs, you can actually keep them in your kitchen year-round.
You want to answer definitely these questions at a minimum. Will they be kept indoor or outdoor? Will they be in a planter or in the ground? And basically this will allow you to know basically how long of a project you're willing to tackle. Because if you're going to be putting them in a pot, you're looking for a longer project, because you might be bringing them in the winter.
And then, so for instance, but if you were going to plant them in the ground, you'd need to consider if the soil is fertilized enough to keep them prosperous for the certain types of herbs that you're choosing. These are all things that you really need to consider before building your herb garden.
There's also a convenience factor. If you're really serious about wanting to incorporate fresh herbs into your meals, are you going to be going around the side of your house around dinner time or lunch to go get herbs, or are you looking for something that's close to a windowsill and a little kept nearer to the kitchen. So just keep that in mind, especially if you might not have access to your backyard from the kitchen.
Yeah. Let's talk the herbs that we chose. Firstly, mint. Aggressive in nature and reputation for taking over a garden, sometimes mint can be hard to control. But if you're able to keep it under control, it's a very rewarding herb to have in your herb garden.
So one of the best ways to grow mint without it getting out of control and rampant is to actually use a container or planter. You also may want to keep the planter a little further away from the other ones to stop crossbreeding or cross-pollination, I should say.
So although mint is a very easy herb to grow, these herbs thrive when they're in organically rich, well-drained soil. So keep that into consideration when you're planting mint if it's a herb that you choose. Full sun and partial shade are acceptable for mint.
So mint leaves can be harvested for use in the kitchen once plant flowers have begun to bloom. So because we've already bought them as the plant, we're okay. But if you're doing seed, keep that in mind. Make sure that you're not cutting too prematurely when they're just like little buds, because then you might not get regrowth.
So there are numerous varieties of mint. We have chosen spearmint, but basically mint can be used from flavoring your full meal, garnishing a beverage or a plate, and it can be used in a recipe as well. So we'll leave a good recipe that we thought was useful for spearmint down below.
So some of the most commonly grown types of mint include spearmint, peppermint, pennyroyal, and chocolate mint.
So the recipe that we're looking forward to using with our spearmint is an arugula watermelon salad, and we're going to actually garnish it with some mint for extra flavor.
So the next herb we're going to be talking about is French lavender, and I'm actually very excited we were able to get our hands on some of this. I've been wanting to go to an Ontario lavender farm for like a couple of years now.
Yeah.
In the GTA specifically, they made like a huge kind of breakthrough around like 2017, because there were like all these different farms selling like lavender infused honey and lavender infused cocktails and soap. So since we won't be going to any of those this year, we got ourselves a little plant and hopefully we can start harvesting it soon.
French lavender can grow in most climates and most temperature zones and most environments, but it is threatened when temperatures drop below 7 degrees Celsius.
And again, just like mint, it appreciates well-drained soil and lots of sunlight.
So lavender is one of those plants where you don't want to overwater it. Basically, it actually excels at resisting drought for itself. There are only 3 cases where you'll want to water your lavender. Upon planting it, during extremely hot heat, and if your lavender is growing in a pot or a flower bed where it's covered and doesn't get any natural water.
So pruning French lavender is possible, but it's very critical that you make sure you're not pruning at the dry wood, because that won't promote regrowth. You have to make sure you're pruning it where there is a flower already made, because if you cut it off from, like, let's say the bottom, it just won't come back up next spring, or if you bring it into the winter.
And let's talk about the recipe. We're looking forward to making a blueberry lavender lemonade, so we'll leave the link down below, we'll leave our recipe card down below, and hopefully we can show you an outcome of how we use this lavender once it's actually budded.
So the last herb we're going to be talking about are chives. Now these ones are clearly ready to be pruned. Basically, when they get higher than 10 centimeters, you want to cut them from their tips. You can use them in any recipe you're working with that requires them, and then wait for regrowth.
Basically, I think that the chives are supposed to be able to support themselves to stand up. If they can't support their own weight,
they need a trimming.
Like a lot of the herbs that we chose at the grocery store, chives are very easy to grow. They like soil, they like sunlight, and they like water. Chives prefer soil that is light but very rich. And obviously, chives don't do well in soil that is too wet or too dry. And don't be alarmed if the chive plant starts to flower. Those flowers are edible too. They're perfectly safe to consume.
So now the recipe we look forward to for incorporating chives into our meals are chive pinwheels. So I think they're going to be like a great dinner roll, but a little different because they're going to have chives in them.
Of course, links will be down below.
run by a few things with you all after you've already planted your herbs and you've gotten your garden going. Just a couple tips for you to know how to maintain them and get the best use out of them.
First things first, let's talk watering. Make sure that your herbs are getting about 2 inches of water every week. So at least once a week, water your herb.
Now, of course, make sure that you're reading about each one that you've chosen specifically, because just like the lavender, that's basically a general rule. Now, if there is one that's predisposed to being a dry or drought plant like the lavender is, you're not going to want to mess with that.
Also, make sure you're harvesting your herbs frequently. If you let them grow for too long, they might actually just stop growing.
So many times a new gardener is afraid to get use out of their herbs because they're scared that if they take too much off, that it's just not going to come back for them and that they're going to be finished their plant. But the opposite is true. You actually want to pick as much as possible because it stimulates the regrowth. Yeah. So at the end of this season, if there's anything that you haven't used of your herbs, or if they're not in a pot that you can bring them inside and keep maintaining them in the kitchen, you can definitely harvest them and then freeze them or dry them. Now, doesn't Sultan actually have a herb drying machine?
Yep, Sultan has a dehydrator, and we actually have an accessory that you can buy for your dehydrator that's meant for drying herbs specifically.
So that's definitely something to consider. Link below,
yeah,
right?
We'll leave the link down below. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below which herbs you're going to include in your herb garden this summer.
And definitely subscribe to be part of the S&C family.
Hope to see you soon.